besarte y sentirme infinito. Con tus labios mágicos vuelo a otro mundo, trascendiendo entre tu ser, enamorándome. Es solo segundos. We're timeless, cosmically aligned, our love is mindless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Timeless, kisses on my neck leaving me boundless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. It was just another Sunday for me. Wasn't looking for a lover, but he caught me by surprise, intoxicated by his eyes, turned me on telepathically. Qué delicia es besarte y sentirme infinito. Con tus labios mágicos vuelo a otro mundo, trascendiendo entre tu ser, enamorándome. Es solo segundos. We're timeless, cosmically aligned, our love is mindless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Timeless, kisses on my neck leaving me boundless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Tu palabra acaricia mi luz. Tu abrazo un bello tono de azul. Yo le leo apasionado por mí. Powerfully charging my creativity. We're timeless, cosmically aligned, our love is mindless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Timeless, kisses on my neck leaving me boundless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Qué delicia es besarte y sentirme infinito. Con tus labios mágicos vuelo a otro mundo, trascendiendo entre tu ser, enamorándome. Es solo segundos. We're timeless, cosmically aligned, our love is mindless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Timeless, kisses on my neck leaving me boundless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. besarte y sentirme infinito. Con tus labios mágicos vuelo a otro mundo, trascendiendo entre tu ser, enamorándome. Solo segundos. We're timeless. Cosmically aligned, our love is mindless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor. Timeless. Kisses on my neck, leaving me boundless. Consciousness expanding through our kindness. Estoy nadando en tu océano de amor.
I apologize, people. Greetings, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. It is I, Archbishop Belmont from the illustrious noble house of Belmont, as well Archbishop of the Third Temple English Church of England. I have to give honor to our Creator, to our ancestors, to our saints, martyrs who have come and gone. I have to give honors to our King, Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet, as well as our Queen, Lisa Jordan from the Royal House of Gallatin, to the members, to the heirs, to the trustees, to the loyal subjects, to the righteous brothers and sisters out there, as well as those Christians, Muslims, Jews, etc. Those who have kept up the traditions, the trusteeship, as well as the other rights and prerogatives of the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion, because they knew the day was going to come that we was going to figure it out. So once again, it is a beautiful time to be alive. For those of you who understand astrology, you know, we are underneath that same energy in regards to Pluto being back in Aquarius. So why this is important is because in 1790, the Notre Dame Cathedral was part of the French Revolution. There was many revolutions that were taking place, including the American Revolution, and various others across the globe. Now, why this is important is because we're underneath that same energy that's going to be affecting us within the next 20 years moving onwards. And it's very important for you to know what happened in the past to know, or at least have an idea what potentially going to happen in the future. One thing I would have to say is that, you know, we have all been dealing with a lot of, you know, shenanigans, trying to figure out this this reality that we have been succumbed to. And one thing that I can promise you is you have been put in a reality that has not been suitable for your growth. Only way for you to get out is you have to go back. Only way for you to go back is you need to have a map. And for you to have a map, you need to know where to get it. And for you to know where to get it is you need to know who have it. The beautiful part about it is the map is hidden in history. And you have the compass. Now the goal is for you to trace it back. And for you to be able to trace it back, you need to know who was the players, who was involved. And one thing that we can know is a lot of the architect that's here in America seem to be held by some of the most powerful people in the world, you know, and in this case, the church as well as the government. So I don't want to go too far into that tangent because, you know, I can get lost in there. But let's go ahead and watch the video in regard to Notre Dame's spiritual rebirth, because we know within a few years ago, the church itself, or the Notre Dame Cathedral, caught on fire, and so they had to go through a renovation process. And for those of you who have common sense will know that the architect, which this is called Gothic or French Gothic architect, which can be traced all the way back to the time of those who come from the territory of the Kingdom of England, Great Britain, Normandy, etc. These were known as, which I would like to call, Berber architect or stone builder's architect. But I don't want to talk about that right now without us seeing what they're going to talk about here regarding the spiritual rebirth. So let's go ahead and get started.
When the fire tore through the Cathedral of Notre Dame in 2019, many people feared that France and the world had just lost one of its great treasures. But incredibly, 5 years on, the cathedral has been reborn and restored to its former glory. Well, I've come to Paris to find out what the restoration of Notre Dame means to the people of France.
C'est assez merveilleux, mais la providence.
It's quite wonderful and providential. My tragedy, my path, ended up giving me a way that I could contribute to the cathedral.
Sur la cathédrale.
It means like a renewal of the faith. I mean, not only one cathedral, but maybe a new start.
People are looking for something to dream about.
Something to believe in.
To dream about.
This is Notre Dame, a symbol of hope. When TV cameras started to show the live pictures, many found them hard to believe. One of the jewels in the crown of Paris, a structure dating back to the 12th century, one of the world's great cathedrals, was burning and looked like it was going to crumble. Thanks to the heroic efforts of the firefighters, its main structure and priceless artifacts were saved, but the damage was devastating. The images of the burning cathedral affected so many people that it caused an outpouring of support and solidarity, and people around the world rallied together and pledged almost $800 million to restore the cathedral. And the man with the enormous task of carrying out the project was Chief Architect Philippe Villeneuve.
Several times I came to the United States to speak about this chantier.
I've heard you say before that the day the fire started here at Notre Dame, the little boy inside of you died. What did you mean by that?
Je suis amoureux fou de Notre Dame de Paris depuis que je suis petit.
Well, because I've been madly in love with Notre Dame de Paris since I was little. Growing up, it was inside the cathedral where I felt good. And when I was 16, I made a model of the cathedral. I was really captivated by it, moved by it.
Et j'ai toujours vu cette espèce de rapport avec la cathédrale.
And little did I know as a kid when I was building the cathedral out of card and paper that one day I would be working on the real cathedral. And so when I laid the last stone of the vault in the north transept, it brought me back. And I saw myself as a kid again, building this vault with paper and cardboard.
Bâtir ma cathédrale.
With pressure from the French government and the 340,000 private donors from around the world, Philippe Villeneuve had to make sure that, as much as possible, original techniques and materials were used, and a team of over 2,000 people worked on the restoration for 5 years.
Ça a été un travail.
It was an enormous amount of work. I realize it now, looking at where we came from.
Je suis stupéfait de la beauté.
I'm really amazed by the beauty, amazed by the work, by the quality of work.
The deeper meaning behind this. Are you a man of faith?
J'ai passé 5 ans à rien dire à ce sujet-là.
You know, I spent 5 years saying nothing about this because I'm a civil servant in a secular republic, and therefore I couldn't say something like this. But now I have to reveal that, yes,
Que j'ai une dévotion particulière à la Vierge, Marie.
I have a particular devotion to the Virgin Mary, and at the risk of sounding totally crazy or like Joan of Arc, I never stopped feeling support coming from up there. I don't think this project would have been possible otherwise, and I think that's what gave me the strength and determination to move forward, because I knew I was supported from up there.
Là-haut.
In the week leading up to the official reopening, the completed restoration work was officially inspected by Emmanuel Macron. The French president, along with millions of others watching live on television, was given a first look at the new altar, the white stone and gold details, and the restored bells. And guiding the president through the cathedral was the rector of Notre Dame, Father Olivier Ribou-Adouma. At a time when religion, or organized religion, is declining in the West and cultures and countries are becoming more secular, were you surprised at the outcry and the outpouring of sorrow and grief when the fire struck in 2019 and the will and the want to restore it from everybody?
Lorsque la cathédrale a brûlé le 15 avril 2019.
When the cathedral burned on April 15, 2019, the strong emotional reaction clearly demonstrated everyone's attachment to this Notre Dame de Paris cathedral.
Quelque chose de l'âme de la France.
Because this cathedral is something of the soul of France. The history of our country is intimately linked with the history of the cathedral, and at the same time, its influence extends far beyond France. The cathedral does not belong to Parisians, nor to Catholics, nor to the French, but it is the common good of all humanity. And its stones speak of God because they have been animated by prayer for more than 800 years.
In the build-up to the reopening, a row erupted in France after the Minister for Culture suggested a €5 fee should be charged to visitors, which could be put towards restoring some of the country's other crumbling cathedrals. However, the Catholic Church and the rector of Notre Dame strongly opposed this, saying entrance to a church should always be free, as it's a place of worship and not a museum.
Et je suis humble aussi devant la mission qui m'est confiée maintenant qu'elle
I have to make sure it is a place of prayer, so that it is a place of celebration, and so that it is a place of discovery of faith.
pour qu'elle soit un lieu de découverte de la foi.
The story of Notre Dame has had a profound effect on the people of France in many different ways, including Paul de Livron. Paul's life changed forever when he was 21 after a hiking accident in the south of France. Bring us back to the beginning. You were hiking with some friends, you were rock climbing 11 years ago here in France, and what happened?
Ah, c'est à peu près ça, effectivement, il y a 11 ans, en 2013, je faisais...
Yes, you're right. It was 11 years ago, in 2013, I was hiking with two friends from the engineering school where I was a student. We were in a very beautiful park near Marseille in the south of France, and I slipped on some gravel at the top of a cliff and fell. I landed in a tree that saved my life, but I twisted my back, and that broke a vertebra and damaged my spinal cord. As a result, I lost most of the ability to use my legs, especially the ability to walk.
La possibilité de marcher en particulier.
For Paul, the accident was catastrophic. He was never going to walk again. But amazingly, he didn't despair. What about your faith? Were you a person of faith before the accident?
Oui, je pense que...
Yes, I was a person who already had faith. And in fact, I believe I owe a lot in particular to Holy Mary for the fact that I survived the accident.
La médaille miraculeuse de la rue.
I was wearing a miraculous medal of Mary around my neck, and I think that's what saved me.
De la Sainte Vierge.
Paul embarked on a new mission in life, designing and hand-carving beautiful wooden wheelchairs, in the hope that they would uplift other users.
Et j'étais complètement sidéré, je pense, comme beaucoup de gens en France et dans le monde.
Like many people in France and around the world, I watched all the news about the fire, wanting to know everything I could about it. I felt this desire to help in the restoration, but because of my wheelchair, even if I had the skills to help, I couldn't even access the construction site, for example. But I was able to get charred wood from the Notre Dame fire, wood dating from the beginning of the 19th century, and I was able to work this into my wheelchairs.
Paul put two dark lines at the back of his chairs, charred wood that survived the fire of Notre Dame, and he says they represent strength and resilience. That's incredible that you wanted so much to help with the restoration.
Yeah.
That this is your way.
Exactement. En fin de compte, c'est assez
Exactly.
merveilleux, mais,
In the end, it's quite wonderful and providential.
sur ce petit chemin,
My tragedy, my path, ended up giving me a way that I could contribute to the cathedral.
sur la cathédrale.
As the Christmas lights twinkle up and down the Champs-Élysées and the Eiffel Tower shines its light across the city, last-minute preparations are underway at the cathedral the night before the grand opening, and in a nearby church, a choir of men and women are holding a final rehearsal. This is the Notre Dame Workers' Choir, made up of over 80 architects, engineers, carpenters, crane operators, construction workers.
I was a painter, kind of painter, and most of the time I'm a sculptor.
Many of us are not familiar with singing or involved in any choir, so I think the result is convincing. It's okay. It's okay.
I think it will be magic. Je suis musulmane.
I'm a Muslim, and for me, being in this choir is all about practicing tolerance on a human scale. It is a fabulous moment for me.
Fabuleux pour moi.
Under the direction of Frédéric Pinu, they are preparing to perform inside Notre Dame in just a few days, the very cathedral which they helped to bring back to life. And later that night, I meet local Parisian Cécile Théveniat. She was one of the people who gathered in front of the burning cathedral to sing and pray. And says the experience had a profound impact on her. We're sitting here in this coffee shop just a stone's throw from Notre Dame Cathedral. Do you remember what it was like that night when it went up in flames?
Oh yeah, of course. Suddenly in the news there was like, there's a big fire. So I went immediately to Notre Dame. We were a lot of people around. And
you came here, you came straight here?
Yeah, of course. And I was like literally crying because we thought that the cathedral would crumble. Then we were praying basically or singing because like we can't do anything.
When you were among the crowd and people were singing and they were praying, what was the atmosphere like? What did it feel like?
You had this magic, you had this very deep moment where everyone was like praying, and I discovered that at this moment French people are deeply attached to this cathedral.
They say you never really miss something until it's gone. And since France almost lost their 900-year-old cathedral forever, Cécile believes this might help to give a boost to the faith, which has been declining in France, like in many other parts of Europe. What do you want the restoration of Notre Dame to represent, not just for Christians here in Paris and in France, but for Christians and believers throughout the world?
It means like a renewal of the faith, because we are the whole continent where the faith is like dying a little bit, or at least we have the impression that it's from the past.
Do you think perhaps some people will even appreciate it more now that they almost lost it?
I'm sure, yeah. And that they will feel it's not only about a building, but about the Virgin Mary and God that we are praising, celebrating there.
All right, we're going to turn now to Paris, where world leaders are gathering to celebrate the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral.
After 5 long years of working and waiting, on a cold and misty Saturday night, December the 7th, as the nation watched live
in my opinion so far, hopefully everyone who's watching it, as you can see, the church itself, it didn't really matter the faith of the people. It brought them together just because they felt a connection to it. Some of them didn't even able to explain it, besides they knew that their culture that they have come to be part of them, this church is part of it. And without the church, they felt that they were lost. As you can see, these landmarks, you know, these great architects or great works of art, which we call marvels, you know, our ancestors put their blood, sweat, and tears into them. And, you know, and it was a way to bring the people together, for us to be one, you know, it was healing. As we see when we grew up in I don't like to utilize the term, but just for the sake of the conversation, the black community, you know, we all grew up as Christians. And when we went to church, you know, we felt a sense of, you know, belonging. We felt a sense of connection. We felt like we were all one. And as they shown from this video, even after the fire, they all were able to come back together as one people outside of their so-called chosen religious belief. They still came back to fix the church, and not only fix the church or the cathedral, but also they feel that it's going to be able to bring them back a sense of harmony with each other again. So as you can see, sometimes you got to lose one thing to appreciate it and to bring new beginnings, in this case a rebirth. So that was something I wanted to show on the first part of the video, but now the rest of it I want you to pay attention to it, because you have to ask yourself, especially here in the United States, if there's a separation of church and state, why would world leaders, especially the President of the United States, why will they go to a ceremony specifically of the Roman Catholic faith, because that's what Notre Dame, the cathedral, is underneath the Roman Catholic faith. And two, why specifically that church? Because there's been many churches all over the world, especially that has, been burnt up and had to either go through a remodeling phase or was actually demolished. But it had to be something specifically important about this church, the cathedral, I know I call it church. This cathedral, the Notre Dame Cathedral. So let's continue. Let's see what these world leaders, all going to come and do, especially knowing that many of them go opposite of what the faith pretty much talks about. All right.
Television, the Archbishop of Paris, Laurent Ulrich, knocked on the doors of Notre Dame.
Modèle de la foi.
Inside, the sound of Notre Dame's famous 8,000 pipe organ filled the cathedral, and a choir sung out in joy. The cathedral looking brighter than ever as all the stone had been cleaned, every single structure repainted, and the stained glass windows given back their colour and vibrancy. In attendance were representatives of over 50 nations, including Prince William from the United Kingdom, First Lady Jill Biden from the United States, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, and US President-elect Donald Trump, who stood right next to French President Emmanuel Macron. Notably absent was Pope Francis, who chose to decline the invitation.
Vive Notre Dame de Paris.
And the following morning, another joyous occasion, when on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the first Mass was celebrated inside the cathedral, and the altar consecrated. In attendance was Henri Delcem, who was greeted by President Macron because of his bravery. Nicknamed France's backpack hero for saving children during a terrorist attack in 2023, he told me he believes Notre Dame's rebirth will be a sign to the young people of France.
There is a lot of energy in France, and people are looking for something to dream about.
Something to believe in.
Something to believe in, but to dream about. Look at the spire of the cathedrals. Yes. It is a direction.
When you say that the spire is a signpost to direct people to dream about something, what is it pointing people towards?
It's like a bridge between earth and heaven.
Earth and heaven.
A finger showing God. Even if we don't have faith, it is a direction, okay? It is a symbol of an ideal, like always look up to the sky, dream big, and to act with greatness.
And with that, the doors of the stunning Notre Dame Cathedral have reopened, ready to welcome once again pilgrims and worshippers from all over the world. In Paris, France, Colin Flynn, EWTN News in Depth.
Okay, so that was a nice little beautiful video news segment in regards to the rebirth of the Notre Dame Cathedral. So that's just the first part of what we're going to talk about in regards of Notre Dame Cathedral. Also, for those of you who are familiar with the historical connection and background with these world leaders actually being here, in 1784, the Treaty of Paris was signed by the constituents of Great Britain, as well as those parties with the United States. That was passed in January, it was ratified January 14th, 1784. So that was pretty much, in my opinion, a rebirthing of that connection, because of without the Treaty of Paris, the United States itself would not have been a so-called operating party to be able to do business here on the territory, what we call America, which those of you who know who you are as English heirs know this is actually Crown territory, or the English Crown. So that's something to actually, you know, rekindle your memory banks, because you must understand the symbolism and the impact of what's taking place, because it's going to affect you whether you know it or not. Also, you have to know that France was the ones that actually funded the United States at the time of their beginning of their enterprise as a birthing of a new nation, because they themselves had no money and nothing to really truly utilize for them to operate with. So that's something that, you know, as I can see, is another connection in regards to that. Now let's go ahead and read a little bit of background on the Notre Dame Cathedral. And we're going to go and utilize, which many brothers and sisters seem to have some type of negative reaction towards, and that's the treaty, that is Wikipedia. You know, here we use it. It gives you a quick summary regarding what it is you want to talk about, and then you want to look at the references where we're getting the sources from, we can show you that as well. So it's not like we're making this up, or we're just utilizing someone else's opinion without being able to verify the citations to corroborate what it is that we're going to talk about. So here we go. Notre Dame de Paris. And as you see, country, France, denomination, Catholic Church. Now, it shows you that it was founded March 24th, 1163. And the cornerstone was laid down April 25th, 1163. So this shows you how old this church is. You got a chance to see the architect, Gothic, or French Gothic, which they call it. I'm going to show it again. That's considered the Gothic architect. So if this was being built around the 1100s, as clearly we can see, we also have architect that's reminiscent here in America. But we're not going to talk about that right now on the video. We're just going to go and do a quick rundown, and then I can show you why this video is important, and especially the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So it says Notre Dame de Paris, meaning Our Lady of Paris, often referred to simply as Notre Dame, is a medieval Catholic cathedral on the island in the River Seine, in the fourth arrondissement of Paris, France. The cathedral, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, is considered one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. Several attributes set it apart from the earlier Romanesque style, including its pioneering use of the ribbed vault, flying buttress, its enormous and colorful rose windows, and the naturalism and abundance of sculptural decoration. Notre Dame is also exceptional for its three-pipe organs, one historic and its immense church bells, as they show from the video that they were restoring. The construction of the cathedral began in 1163 under the Bishop Maurice de Sully and was largely completed by 1260, though it was modified in succeeding centuries. In the 1790s, which I spoke about earlier, during the French Revolution, Notre Dame suffered extensive desecration. Now, what are the odds that Notre Dame suffered a fire just 4 or 5 years ago for them to have to start the restoration? As I'm explaining, 1790s was during the time of what? Pluto been inside Aquarius, or transiting in Aquarius, and was going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. Same thing is taking place right now. So that's why I'm saying this is very important to notice, because you're getting a glimpse of how things may eventually start transpiring moving forward. So it says, in 1790, during the French Revolution, Notre Dame suffered extensive desecration. Much of its religious imagery was damaged or destroyed. In the 19th century, the cathedral hosted the coronation of Napoleon and the funerals of many of the French Republic's presidents. The 1831 publication of Victor Hugo's, leave off at, novel Notre Dame de Paris inspired interest which led to restoration between 1844 and 1864, supervised by Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. On August 26, 1944, the liberation of Paris from German occupation was celebrated in the Notre Dame with the signing of the Magnificat. Beginning in 1963, the cathedral's facade was cleansed out of soot and grime. Another cleaning and restoration project was carried out between 1991 and 2000. A fire in April 2019, which we were just speaking about, caused serious damage, closing the cathedral for repairs. It reopened December 24, which is this month. All right. It says it's a widely recognized symbol of the city of Paris and the French nation. So as you can see, the cathedral itself is a representation of the French people. In 1805, it was awarded honorary status as a minor basilica. As the cathedral of the Archdiocese of Paris, Notre Dame contains the cathedra, or the seat of the Archbishop of Paris, currently Laurent Ulrich. In the 21st century, about 12 million people visited Notre Dame annually, making it the most visited monument in Paris. Over time, the cathedral has gradually been stripped of many decorations and artworks. It still contains its Gothic, Baroque, and 19th century sculptures, 17th and early 18th century altarpieces, and some of the most important relics in Christendom, including the crown of thorns and a silver nail from the true cross. So as you can see, the Cathedral of Notre Dame is a very, very important piece in history. And as we can see, just based off of the timeline and understanding that just going and it's in the territory of Paris, France, we know that the Belmonts, as well, the Royal House of Anjou, descendants all can be traced in this territory. So of course we would have some type of natural affinity and connection to it, just based off of knowing that our ancestors had a real nice deep affinity to it, on top of they were the ones that created or built the cathedral back during those days. So let's go ahead and get down to what I want to get to. History, because history is always what you want to know about these things. It says, it is believed that before the arrival of Christianity in France, a Gallo-Roman temple dedicated to Jupiter, and remember the lesson is named Notre Dame Cathedral and Temple of Jupiter Connection. So location. It's not a coincidence that this location was chose. So why it was chose is what we want to know. Let's get a little background history on Jupiter, because you need to know what the Romans practiced before they became Christians, because we know we're still underneath Roman occupation, underneath the guise of Christianity. All right, it says Jupiter, a god. Okay, so the temple of Jupiter, as we can see, was consecrated for the god Jupiter. And for those of you who know astrology or astronomy, you know that the planet, one of the largest gas giants, name is Jupiter. Let's go ahead and read. Jupiter was known as King of the Gods. All right, so this temple was known as the King of the Gods temple. God of the sky, diurnal thunder, member of the archaic triad, Capitoline triad, and D Consentes. The other names for Jupiter were Jove, venerated in an imperial cult of ancient Rome, polytheistic religion, abode the heavens. All right, so this is the temple of Jupiter, aka the temple of the King of the Gods, and his location where he abode was heaven, as we can see. It shows you the planet equivalent and the symbol. The symbol of Jupiter is the lightning bolt, the eagle, the oak tree. Repeat, the lightning bolt, the eagle, and the oak tree. These are all the symbols of Jupiter. And his day is Thursday, what they call Deis Jehovah's, or Jehovah's. The genealogy of Jupiter. His parents are Saturn and Ops. His siblings are Vesta, Cetus, or Ceres, Juno, Pluto, Neptune. His consort, as you can see, was his sister Juno. His children were Mars, Vulcan, Bellona, Angelos, Lucina, Juventus, Minerva, Hercules. And then his equivalents, Etruscan was Tenia, Greek equivalent is Zeus, Hindu Deus Pita, and then Indo-European Deus Peter. All right, so Jupiter is how you get Peter, which they said whose temple was built on Peter's rock? Christ's temple. All right, so this is where a lot of that connection is coming from. Okay. Jupiter, also known as Jove, is the god of the sky and the thunder, and the king of the gods in ancient Roman religion and mythology. Jupiter was the chief deity of the Romans. Pay attention, because remember, the United States itself is what? It's a republican. It's a republican form of government. So Jupiter was the chief deity of the Roman state religion throughout the republican and imperial eras. All right, so if we're back underneath the so-called Republican era, then that will also seem to mean that, based off of the connection, what I'm seeing, just that's why it's a question, that for the Temple of Notre Dame being erected on the same location of the Temple of Jupiter, and yet the same symbols are also look like the same symbols as reminiscent to which the United States use. And you also have the same leaders of the United States going to, as you go along with what I'm saying, going to a ceremony to rebirth the opening of the temple, which we call Notre Dame Cathedral, on the same location that the Temple of Jupiter was built. Got to keep your mind open in regards to what's taking place right here, brothers and sisters. So it says, in the Roman mythology, until the Christianity became the dominant religion of the empire. All right, so we know Christianity came and it didn't completely usurp the religion that was there. It just pretty much kind of blanketed itself over it. So a lot of the old religion is actually still there. You just don't see it as out in the opening for us. It's obvious to you. So it says, in the Roman mythology, he negotiates with Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome, to establish principles of Roman religion, such as offering or sacrifice. Jupiter is usually thought to have originated as a sky god. His identifying implement is the thunderbolt, and his primary sacred animal is the eagle, which held precedence over other birds in the taking of auspices and became one of the most common symbols of the Roman army. See Aquila. Now, we also see that symbol as well as the seal of the United States, the eagle. We also, too, once again, know that, as I spoke above before, that the United States itself is underneath a republican form of government. So we now have to keep an open mind in regards to what God is actually part of the United States as well, based off of what we're seeing. All right, so it says the two emblems were often combined to represent the god in the form of an eagle holding in its claws a thunderbolt, frequently seen on Greek and Roman coins. As the sky god, he was divine witness to oaths, the sacred trust on which justice and good government depend. Many of his functions were focused on the Capitoline Hill, where the citadel was located. And the Capitoline Triad, he was the central guardian of the state with Juno and Minerva. His sacred tree was the oak tree. The Romans regarded Jupiter as the equivalent of the Greek Zeus. In the Latin literature and Roman art, the myths and iconography of Zeus are adapted under the name Jupiter. In the Greek-influenced tradition, Jupiter was the brother of Neptune and Pluto. The Roman equivalents of Poseidon, that would be Neptune, and Hades, respectively, that'd be Pluto. We know Poseidon ruled the seas. We know Pluto ruled the underworld, or what they call the netherworld, or the Netherlands. Each presided over one of the three realms of the universe: sky, waters, and the underworld, which we just spoke about. The italic Diaspora was also a sky god who manifested himself in the daylight, usually identified with Jupiter. And then, like they say, the Etruscan counterpart Tenia right here. Now let's see his role in the state, because once again, he also rules the state. So the Romans believed that Jupiter granted them supremacy because they had honored him more than any other people had. All right, so the Romans are equivalating themselves or putting themselves in a position of supremacy because they felt that they have granted this superiority over the fact that they have honored planet Jupiter more than any other so-called people. All right, so it says Jupiter was the font of the auspices upon which the relationship of the city with the gods rested. He personified the divine authority of Rome's highest offices, internal organization, and external relations. His image in the Republican and an imperial capital bore regalia associated with Rome's ancient kings and the highest consular and imperial honors. The councils swore their oath of office in Jupiter's name. So you hear this? So oaths of office were sworn underneath Jupiter's name and honored him on the annual feriae of the capital in September. To thank him for his help and to secure his continued support, they sacrificed a white ox, which is called a boss mas, with gilded horns. A similar sacrificial offering was made by triumphal generals who surrendered the tokens of their victory at the feet of Jupiter's statue in the capital. Some scholars have viewed the triumphator as embodying or impersonating Jupiter in the triumphal procession. Now, what are the odds that you have a President Trump who just triumphed over his the word I'm thinking of, can't think of it right now, his opponent, excuse me, and she was a Democrat. So you have Trump, who's a Republican. We can see Republicans are underneath the auspices of the energy of Jupiter as Romans, trumped over his Democratic opponent. And based off of what we read in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, Democrats can be traced back to Berbers. So it's no coincidence what they're showing there, because it's a play out on, which we would say, Rome so-called conquering the Berbers. But I'm not going to talk about that in this video. We're going to talk about that later on down the road. All right, so it says Jupiter's association and kingship and sovereignty was reinterpreted as Rome's form of government changed. Originally, Rome was ruled by kings. After the monarchy was abolished and a republic established. So as you can see, that's also what happened here in the United States. Prior to it actually being placed underneath a republican form of government, which is equivalent to a commonwealth, it was ruled by the monarch or the kings. And the British monarchs, we know, were still underneath the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church. All right, so as you can see, what's taking place right here is almost like history, once again, is repeating itself. Originally, Rome, like I said, was ruled by kings after monarchy was abolished and a republic established. Religious prerogatives were transferred to the patrices, the patrician ruling class. Nostalgia for the kingship, affectatio regni, was considered treasonous. Those suspected of harboring monarchical ambitions were punished. So, same thing that took place after the United States, after Great Britain pretty much, quote unquote, went into its interregnum. Anyone who was supportive of the crown was being placed in bondage or jailed. And as we can see, that those who was known as the black loyalists had pledged their allegiance to the crown. You know, not only the crown of Great Britain, but most of them were also descendants from the Kingdom of England, as well as Scottish subjects from the Kingdom of Scotland. And we know based off of the Magna Carta that those English heirs are supposed to have been free forever. So therefore, they were technically outside of the jurisdiction of the Roman Catholic Church. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. It says, in the 5th century BC, the triumphator Camillus was sent into exile after he drove a chariot with a team of 4 white horses, an honor reserved for Jupiter himself. While Marcus Manlius, whose defense of the capital against the invading Gauls had earned him the name Capitolinus, was accused of regal pretensions. He was executed as a traitor by being cast from the Tarpeian Rock. His house on the Capitoline Hill was razed, and it was decreed that no patrician should ever be allowed to live there. Capitoline Jupiter represented a continuity of royal power from the regal period and conferred power to the magistrates. So this is similar to what took place in, like I said, the beginning of the United States founding, was that the power came from the crown and now is transferred over to the so-called states, down to the so-called magistrates, because the magistrates are the local governments, judges, and the municipalities are magistrates. All right, so it said it conferred power to the magistrates who paid their respects to him. All right, so that was showing that the judges was paying their respects, going all the way back to so-called Jupiter. All right, so it says during the conflict of the orders, Rome's plebeians demanded a right to hold political and religious office. During their first secessio, similar to a general strike, they withdrew from the city and threatened to found their own. When they agreed to come back to Rome, they vowed the hill where they retreated to Jupiter as a symbol and a guarantor of the unity of the Roman Respublica. So that's the Roman Republic. Plebeians eventually became eligible for all the magistracies and most priesthoods, but the high priest of Jupiter remained the preserve of the patricians. All right. And let me see what else I want to read from here, because I got to go ahead and play the video. Right. Let's see what this is. Okay, the temples. All right, so it says the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus stood on the Capitoline Hill in Rome. Jupiter was worshipped there as an individual deity, with Juno and Minerva as parts as Capitoline triad. The building was supposedly begun by King Tarquinius Priscus, completed by the last king, and inaugurated in the early days of the Roman Republic. It was topped with the statues of 4 horses drawing a quadriga with Jupiter as a charioteer. A large statue of Jupiter stood within on festival days. Its face was painted red. In or near this temple was the Jupiter Lapis, the Jupiter stone on which oaths could be sworn. It says Jupiter Capitoline Temple probably served as the architectural model for his provincial temples. When Hadrian built Aelia Capitolina on the site of Jerusalem, a temple to Jupiter Capitolinus was erected in the place of the destroyed temple in Jerusalem. So as you can see, they destroyed the temple of Jerusalem, and then they placed the temple of Jupiter, their idol gods, in place of it. All right, let's get to the next one. Let's see where. Maybe we'll just go straight to the video. All right, so it says the Latin name Jupiter originated as a vocative compound of the Old Latin vocative "eu" and "pater," which means father. It came to replace the Old Latin nominative case "eius" or "Jova." It's a less common English formation based on Jove or love. The stem of oblique casts the Latin name. Linguistic studies identified the form Jupiter as derived from the Proto-Italic vocable Deus Pater, and ultimately the Indo-European vocative compound De Jupiter, meaning "O Father, Sky God." So you see the connection, brothers and sisters? As they put your sky god, who you believed in, it was Jupiter. One second. It was Jupiter. Jupiter was your sky god, and as we can see, the planet Jupiter, we can see that in the sky, but that's an abstract understanding. Okay, so it says older forms of the deity's name in Rome was Deus Pater, which means day sky father. Then Deus Pater. The 19th century philologist George Wasawa asserted these names were conceptually and linguistically connected to Diovis and Diovis Pater. He compares the analogous formations of Deus, Vieva, and Volker Deum as opposed to the Volker Subamonum, which is a nocturnal lightning bolt, and Flamine Dialis, based on Deus and Dies. The ancient later viewed them as entities separate from Jupiter. The terms are similar in etymology and semantics. You hear this? So dies or dies is daylight, and Deus, daytime sky. So Jupiter, once again, was known as the daytime sky god. Jupiter or Jupiter, known as Old Father or the Heavenly Father, was the sky god. And this Old Heavenly Father had many different names depending on what culture spoke about him. But in this instance, we're talking about him based off of the Romans, because why? You're underneath Roman occupation, so you need to know how they practice or how they honor their gods and what took place in regards to them honoring their gods. And as you can see, they did do sacrifices in the name of their sky god based off of what we're reading. And as we can see, that they're saying that the Cathedral of Notre Dame was built in the territory of known as the Old Temple of Jupiter. Now, why is this important? Is because we just seen all of the so-called leaders of the world come to Notre Dame Cathedral out of all the cathedrals in the world to give it their blessings in regards to the rebirth of the so-called spirituality that's going to be coming out of that temple or out of that cathedral. And as you can see, we have to read the history of what happened and who honored it or worshipped. And as we can see, is Rome. And it only makes sense because it's a Roman Catholic cathedral. So they're still keeping up their practices and tradition that goes back during the time that many of us know nothing about. All right, so we have to pay attention to what's happening because history repeats itself. It says the Deus is the etymological equivalent of ancient Greece Zeus and of the Teutonic Zeu. The Indo-European deity is the god from which the names and partially theology of Jupiter, Zeus, and the Indo-Aryan Vedic Deus Pita derive or have developed. The Roman practice of swearing by Jove to witness an oath in law courts. So as you can see, when you're doing swearing on the Bible or taking an oath in court, you're actually swearing to Jupiter, to the Father God. All right. Is the origin of the expression by Jove archaic but still in the use. The name of the god was also adopted as the name of the planet Jupiter. The adjective jovial originally described those born under the planet of Jupiter, reputed to be jolly, optimistic, and buoyant in temperament. All right, and then also too, for those of you who understand astrology, know that Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and Pisces is ruled by the planet Jupiter. Now, what are the odds that, once again, that this is the temple or cathedral, which is supposed to be a church, which is called what? The historically temple of Jupiter, which is known as the Sky Father, or the Sky God, or the God of the day. All right, and his day of the week was Thursday, which we call Thor's Day. And his symbol was also the lightning bolt, which is representation of the Norse god Thor. So as you see, there's always going to be there's a connection between the Roman gods, the Norse gods, the Greek gods. They all go back to the same custom and understanding that they had different names throughout history and whatever culture. So it's the same people or the same thing, and in this case, it's the heavenly bodies above, those which they consider the gods. All right, so it says Jove was the original namesake of Latin forms of the weekday, now known in English as Thursday, originally called Eovus Dies in Latin. These became Weidi in French, Jueves in Spanish, Joy in Romanian, and then you got the other languages there you guys can go through. And then you have the major epithets of a Roman god indicate his theological qualities. The study of these epithets must consider their origins, the historical context of an epithet source. So you need to know who's writing these stories, because the way that they're giving these gods their characteristics are based off of specific archetypes, and they're trying to put them in a human what they call a humanistic form. So therefore, you can kind of understand how that energy plays out in the walking or the awakening life. All right, so it says Jupiter's most ancient attested forms of cult belong to the state cult. Here it is, the state cult, which many of you are actually part of, because if you're part of the circular churches, you're part of the state cult. These include the Mount cult. In Rome, this cult entailed the existence of particular sanctuaries, the most important of which were located on Mons Capitolinus, earlier Tarpeius. The mount had two tops that were both destined to the discharge of acts of cult related to Jupiter. The northern, the higher top was the Arx, and on it was located observation place of the Augurs, and it is headed to the monthly procession of the Sacra Idulia. On the southern top was to be found the most ancient sanctuary of the god, the shrine of Jupiter Feretrius, allegedly built by Romulus, restored by Augustus. The god here had no image and was represented by the sacred flintstone, which is called the silex. So, which me and King Clifford Jefferson was speaking in regards about the Flintstones. I would see he'll get a kick out of that. The most ancient known rites, those of the Spolia Opima and the Officials, which connect Jupiter with Mars and Quirinus, are dedicated to Jupiter Feretrius or Jupiter Lapis. The concept of the sky god was already overlapped with the ethical and political domain since this early time. According to the Wasawa and the Dumazul, Jupiter Lapis seemed to be the inseparable form from Jupiter Feretrius, in which tiny temple on the capital of the stone was lodged. Another most ancient epithet is Lucius, although the ancients, followed by some modern scholars such as Wasawa, interpreted as referring to sunlight. The Carmen Salaria shows this is referred to lightning. A further confirmation of this interpretation is provided by the sacred meaning of lightning, which is reflected in the sensitivity of the Flaminica Dialis to the phenomena. All right, the rest of that, because it's all speaking in regards to the characteristics of Jupiter. And get to what I want to get to before the video. Let's see. All right, here. So Jovian theology. It says George Wasawa stressed Jupiter's uniqueness as the only case among Indo-European religions in which the original god preserved his name, his identity, and his prerogatives. In this view, Jupiter is the god of heaven and retains his identification with the sky among the Latin poets. His name is used as a synonym for sky. In this respect, he differs from his Greek equivalent, Zeus, who is considered a personal god, warden and dispenser of sky light. His name reflects this idea. It is the derivative of the Indo-European word for bright, shining sky. All right, now remember we also speaking about ether. Remember, ether was also known as the upper layer where the gods dwell, and that's where the gods breathe. It's the ether. All right. It says his residence is found atop the hills of Rome and of mountains in general. As a result, his cult is present in Rome and throughout Italy at upper elevations. So as you can see, in the upper elevations, aka in the mountains, is where the sky god was worshipped. And in this case, we already know who those folks were who used to do a lot of these worshiping up there in the mountains. Berbers. So it says, however, Wasawa acknowledges that, a master part. So Jupiter assumed atmospheric qualities. He is the wielder of lightning and the master of weather. However, Wasawa acknowledges that Jupiter is not merely a naturalistic, heavenly supreme deity. He is a continual communication with man by means of thunder, lightning, and the flight of his birds, his auspices. Through his vigilant watch, he is also the guardian of public oaths and compacts and the guarantor of good faith in the state code. All right, so the people in the state themselves supposed to be doing things in what? In good faith. The Jovian cult was common to the Italic people under the names of Milov, Diov, which is Latin, Iova, Diove, Oscan and Umbrian only Love, Jupiter, and Iogavan tables. Wasawa considered Jupiter also a god of war and agriculture. In addition to his political role as guarantor of good faith, public and private as Jupiter, Lapis, and Deus Fidius, respectively. His view is grounded in the sphere of action of the god who intervenes in battle and influences the harvest through weather. All right, and that will be the part I would end on this part with Jupiter. Now let's go to the video. Don't forget, brothers and sisters, please like, share, subscribe. Oops, the one. This is the one.
When new transactions add up, you want an extra hand with bookkeeping. Automate your income and expenses so you can confidently manage your business. Less time bookkeeping, more time for your passion. Visit QuickBooks.com and save 50% now.
Now this is the temple of Jupiter and Baalbek. This clearly is not there in France anymore, based off of which we spread.
أربع أقسام. تيسرت مين هذا؟ بروبيليا أول اسم. بروبيليا كان درج عرضه 50 متر. قال لي 2 متر سكالا. 12 عمود جرانيت وجهها. لوديكا كولونيس أبو جرانيتي ستيلوبس. مسقوف بخشب الأرض، أرضه موزيك. بزمان هذول تاني ما شيلوا أبو. كيكاتو مسايكاتو. الجهتين ابراج الحرس يا ابو ديب الابريس يبيرجي وفي اللاكس هذا القسم الثاني الملعب المسدس جهات كانت حوالي 30 عمود جرانيت اذا بلابتي اوكساغونو سان بلاتيا اوكساغني بلاتياس ان يبدو ايتاني ما يورو مترياندا كولونيس ابو جرانيت وعلى الدير كان مسؤول بخشب الارض الوسط مفتوح للشمس وارضه المزيك. سميتي عن اختول هذه ستريكي سان ستريكي افلي على يورو ستابيليستي هذه كي بازمينو بالي مكسيلو ابو كيدرو. كانوا يستعملوه للرقص الدين الروماني. ادو خريباني تا تس خروش ميسا رومان سيد لافياتي. كل رومانيوم راجع. على الدير كان 84 عمود جرانيت. يورو البير خانتوتي أغضون تسلس كولونيس أبو جرانيت وعلى الداير مسقوف النص مفتوح للشمس تو إيديو تابيرستيريا سكيبازمينا مكسينو ستوكيندرو أنيكتو و12 شكل مستطيل ومدور ل 250 تمثال فوق وتحت وعلى الداير كيف فاسس كي ثيسس لدي كابيلز كم تمثال 250 يدياكوسا بينين دا غالمتا que τα θυσιαστήρια τα καταστρέψανε οι Βυζαντινοί και κτίσανε εκκλησίες στο κέντρο. Η κολόνα στη μέση εκεί, μονοκόμματη πέτρα, δείχνει πως μεταφέρανε τα κομμάτια μονοκόμματης πέτρας, δηλαδή από το Ασουάν. كانوا يستعملوه للرقص الديني الروماني. إدو خريباني توش خروش ميسا زونا سيد لكياتي. كوروميهم هذا. وعلى الجهتين الحيطان مستطيل يحطوا تماثيل فوق وتحت، أما القناطر ضافوها مماليك مصر لضرب الأوس والنشاب والنبل. Εδώ από δύο ορόφους βάλανε σε βάσεις αγάλματα τότε, αλλά οι αψίδες στην εποχή των Μαμιλούκων από εδώ και πέρα δεν αφήσανε τον κόσμο να πλησιάζει το άγαλμα του Θεού δηλαδή. Μόνο οι μοναχοί που ήταν, οι ιερέες που ήταν στο ναό, πήγανε μέσα στο άγαλμα, γυρίσανε πίσω και είπαν στον κόσμο δέχτηκε ο Θεός τη θυσία σας. Στην περιφέρεια αυτή υπήρχαν 54 κολόνες. Από τις κολόνες που ήταν γύρω-γύρω, σταθήκανε και μείνανε αυτές οι κολόνες σαν δείγμα, δηλαδή τεράστιες κολόνες με κορυφιακά κοινόχρονα και... بس من حوالي طول العمود 22 متر. 22 μέτρα ύψος. مترين و20 عرضه. 2 μέτρα και 20 εκατοστά κάτω η βάση. ثلاث قطع. Από 3 κομμάτια κάθε κολόνα. بكل قطعة بتكتب خويش للبحاث ورصاص البرونز ليجمعوا الصخر مع بعض. Υπήρχαν τρύπες μεταξύ τα κομμάτια στη μέση, ένα συνδέο με μολύβι. 7 μέτρα ήταν το ύψος του αγάλματος του Δία και η σκάλα κάτω του ήταν 13. Το πλάτη του ναού 51 μέτρα. Αποτελείται από 3 πέτρες μεγάλες. Κάθε πέτρα ζυγίζει πάνω από 800 τόνους. Που είναι κάτω από μας. Αυτή η πέτρα 4 μέτρα πιο κάτω 5 μέτρα. Μέχρι εκεί. Και δεύτερη, και μετά έρχεται εκεί. Οι 3 πέτρες που αναφέρονται δηλαδή. Το τρίλιθον.
Okay, so that's pretty much just kind of give you an example of the Temple of Jupiter and Baalbek. As you can take a look at the columns that they have shown, these are all reminiscent of what you see in your local government. So as you can see, the local government as well as these churches all had a connection when it comes down to worshiping the same gods. In this case, we're speaking about Jupiter, the sky god, known as the Father God Father God. So as you can see, brothers and sisters, that what you have been worshiping and praying to is not what you think. You know, it's not what you think at all. And as we can see, that these world leaders aren't praying who and what you think as well. They're praying and worshiping to the same God, just a different name. And in this case, as we can see, Jupiter. All right, so let's go ahead and read a little bit about the Pillar of the Boatman, because the Pillar of the Boatman is considered the last piece of the Temple of Jupiter that was actually found in France. So it's all called the Pillar of the Boatman. Is a monumental Roman column erected in Lucia, which is called modern Paris, in honor of Jupiter by the Guild of Boatmen in the 1st century AD. It is the oldest monument in Paris and one of the earliest pieces of representational Gallo-Roman art to carry a written inscription. The Roman name for the monument is Nautae Parisiaci, the sailors of the Parisi, who were a tribe of Gauls. Now, we know that the Gauls from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica were actually Berbers. And so it says it was found reused in the 4th century city wall on the Ile de la Cité and is now displayed in the Frigidarium of the Thermes de Cluny. Let me see. It says the inscription, written in Latin with some Gaulish language features, the inscription mingles Roman deities with gods that are distinctly Gaelic. The pillar is dated by dedication to Tiberius Caesar Augustus. That is Tiberius, who became emperor in 14 AD. It was set up publicly by the Guild of Sailors of Lutetia from the Civitas of Parisi, that means the city of Parisi. These sailors would have been merchants who travel along the Seine. The main dedication is to the Jupiter in the form of Iovis Optimus Maximus. So it says Jove, best and the greatest. The names of the emperor and the supreme deity appear in the dative case as the recipients of the dedication. The remaining theonyms as nominative legends are that accompany individual depictions of the gods. These are in order they appear below: Jove, Tarvus, Choraigranos. I messed the name up, but bear with me. The bull with 3 cranes, Vulcanus, which is Vulcan, Isus, Cernunnos, Castor, Smertrios, and the Fortuna. Alright, it says the dedication is follow. I'm not going to read that. And here's the image of the blocks. Some of the symbols, figures. Alright. Back out. It says, now, history of the pillar. Sometime in the 3rd century, the stone blocks that formed the pillar were broken into 2 and used reinforced foundations of the walls along the riverbank. Over time, the island grew slightly so that the 3rd century wharfs are now a dozen meters from the banks of the river. The Cathedral of Saint Etienne was founded by Childebert in 528 AD on the site of the Gallo-Roman temple. Notre Dame de Paris was in turn built over this in 1163. So they're showing you, like, in the site where the original temple of Jupiter is built, the temple of Paris, or excuse me, the Notre Dame Cathedral was built over it. All right. So that means that they just recreated another temple of Jupiter, but now it's called the Notre Dame Cathedral. And based off of the results of what we're seeing once again with the world leaders and what they have known to represent in the Republican form of government, then it's safe to say that they also too practice the same religion that those who are known as the Roman pagans practice they're doing today. The pillar was found on March 6, 1710 during the construction of a crypt under the nave of Notre Dame de Paris, and first published by Baudelat de Dardeval in 1712. Now all of the pieces were recovered. For 3 of the tiers, we have only the top half. After discovery, the stone blocks were taken to the Hotel de Cluny, a medieval ecclesiastical building constructed over the remains of a 2nd century Roman bathhouse. This became the Musée de Cluny and then the Musée National de Moyen Age. I guess that's the museum. In 2001, the blocks were restored, removing the black patina of grime that had accumulated on the surface of the stone over the 3 centuries. Since discovery, the restored stones are once again on display in the museum. All right, so let's go back to the top so we can just take a look at the stone a little bit more after I go make sure it's fine. All right, so here we go again. Some crazy looking figures on there. And this is called the Boatman. Alright, so the different gods. Some inscription. They look like said Caesar. Tipa Caesar. Yep, so that's Caesar. So Maximus. Blah, blah, blah. Can't read the rest of that. Alright. Let's see. Make sure that's all I wanted to show for that. Alright, once again, let's take a look at the outside. Now look at this. This is what I want brothers and sisters to see. This is Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, you still see this architect, what they call French Gothic, over here in America. This is all over here. I have churches in my city, my territory, just like this. They also show the image of King Edgar the Peaceful in the Winchester Cathedral. Look just like it. These entry or these archways are called portals. Look how intricate the design is on these, brothers and sisters. And this is what our ancestors have designed. Yep. Just pulled it back so it's easier to marvel at it. And like I said, they don't make this anymore. They don't create any architect like this any longer because they said there's no use. Now, as we showed us on the beginning of the video, it showed how the cathedral itself brought the people together. You know, it gave the people of France, or the Kingdom of France, we can also say, because the kingdom was running during this time, brought you a sense of identity. And that was one thing that we know that the churches or cathedrals or the temples were known to bring the people together, to give them a sense of identity, gave them a sense of purpose. You gave you a sense of belonging. And when people aren't part of a church, and we can see they lose that identity, they lose that sense of belonging, they forget who they are. And we can see that these ceremonial purposes that the government them are still doing is still giving their homage to who gave them the ability to exist. And in this case, they feel that the planet Jupiter is who giving them all of the ability to do everything that they do out here. And in this case, Jupiter, or Jupiter, known as the father, which once again, which we know without our mother and father, we wouldn't be able to exist. So this is how they pay their homage to their sky god, to their father, and they pay homage through, as you can see, through sacrifices. And that's, as we read from the story. Let's go back. All right, so let me see. I'm gonna make sure that's right here. All right, so right here, as we can see, and Pasqualini has argued that Viovis, who is technically Jupiter, seems related to Jupiter Lateris, as the original figure of this Jupiter would have been superseded on the Alban Mount, that's the White Mountain, whereas it preserved its gruesome character in the ceremony held on the sanctuary of the Lateir Hill, the southernmost hilltop of the Quirinal in Rome, which involved a human sacrifice. The gens Lulia had Gentilician cults at Bovillae, where a dedicatory description to Vividov, which is Jupiter, had been found in 1826 on an era. According to Pasqualini, it was a deity similar to Vividov, wielder of lightning bolts, and chthonic, who was connected to the cult of the founders who first inhabited the Alban Mount, which is the Mount of Albion, or the White Mountain, and built the sanctuary. Such a cult, once superseded on the mount, would have been taken up and preserved by the Lilili, private citizens bound to the Sacra Albana by their Alban origin. And we know Alban is another name to say Albion. And make sure that's not it. Oh, here we go. Iuventus, along with Terminus, Iuventus, also known as Iuventus and Iunta, represents an aspect of Jupiter. As the legend of her refusal to leave the Capitol Hill demonstrates, her name has the same root as Juno, from youngster. The ceremonial litter bearing the sacred goose of Juno Moneta stopped before her sacellum on the festival of the goddess. Later, she was identified with the Greek Hebe. The fact that Jupiter is related to the concept of youth is shown by his epithets puer, iuntus, and ioveste, interpreted as the youngest by some scholars. Dumzo noted that the presence of the two minor sovereign deities Bhaga and Erayaman, besides the Vedic sovereign gods Varuna and Mitra, though most closely associated with Mitra, the couple will be reflected in Rome by Terminus and Iuventus. Iriaman is the god of young soldiers. The function of Iuventus is to protect the Iuvenus, the Novi Togadi of the year, who are required to offer a sacrifice to Jupiter on the capital. All right, the capital, we can also represent Capitol Hill. All right, so sacrifices to Jupiter on Capitol or Capitol Hill. And this is what they done. They done human sacrifices to the gods throughout eons. How long, I can't tell. But based off of the historical connection and what we've seen, this is something that they do all the time. All right, so who's required to offer sacrifice to Jupiter on the Capitol, and the Roman soldiers, a function later attributed to Juno. King Servius Tullius, in reforming the Roman social organization, required that every adolescent offer a coin to the goddess of youth upon entering adulthood. Let me see anything else. And that's pretty much it on Jupiter, the sky god, who they built the Notre Dame Cathedral temple over his temple, which showing that they actually are one and the same. That existed right before Christianity. So only thing that happened was Christianity was just blanketed over what was already there. Christianity just blanketed over what was already there. And now, as you see, within the guise of them still worshiping their sky god Jupiter, they do it in the form of the Roman Catholicism. And we can see today, based off of the understanding of the symbols of Jupiter, what Jupiter represents, as well as the understanding that the United States itself is underneath a republic form of government. Let's go ahead and see that. Thought I pulled it up. First, let's go back to the symbols. All right, so you see his symbols is a lightning bolt, eagle, and he represents Jupiter, the chief deity of Rome, of the Roman state religion throughout the Republican and the imperial eras until Christianity became the dominant religion of the empire. All right. So let's maintain that understanding. He's the god of the Republican. He's the god of the Republican government. All right, let's go to Republican. Roman Republic. Shows you all of the extent of the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic was the era of classical Roman civilization, beginning with the overthrow of the Roman kingdom and ending in 27 BC with the establishment of the Roman Empire following the War of Actium. During this period, Rome's control expanded from the city's immediate surroundings to hegemony over the entire Mediterranean world. Roman society at the time was primarily a cultural mix of Latin and Etruscan societies, as well as of Sabine, Oscan, and Greek cultural elements, which is especially visible in the ancient Roman religion and its pantheon. Its political organization developed at around the same time as direct democracy in ancient Greece, which collective annual magistracies overseen by a senate. There were annual elections, but the republican system was an elective oligarchy, not a democracy. So as you can see, the republican form of government is an oligarchy. It actually, not like we see, is not a democracy, period. And we see the fact that it's an oligarchy is because oligarchs deal with the energy of Jupiter, which deals about expansion, abundance. As you can see, Rome did what? They expanded their so-called empire, and they expanded their so-called empire. Why? Because they prayed, or they felt that they gave more reverence to the planet Jupiter. Jupiter, they felt, should have gave them as much as they asked for, because of he's the one who they're giving a lot of their sacrifices to. All right. It says a small number of powerful families largely monopolized the magistracies. Roman institutions underwent considerable changes throughout the Republic to adapt to the difficulties it faced, such as the creation of pro-magistracies to rule its conquered provinces. And so, for instance, we see that the local government, once again, is ran, their government courts are ran by magistrates. So the magistrates are actually the ones that's pretty much have the people in your local territories in the chokehold that they have them into. And as we can see, that the magistrates also worship Jehovah or Jove or Jupiter, which is known as Jupiter, or their sky god. Give me 1 second. All right. It says, unlike the Pax Romana of the Roman Empire throughout the Republican era, Rome was in a state of near perpetual war. Ain't that what's going on now? You know, it seems like the United States is always in a perpetual state of war. Its first enemies were its Latin and Etruscan neighbors, as well as the Gauls who sacked Rome. So for those of you who've done your research, you know the Etruscans as well as the Gauls are all technically Berbers. They're the same people who sacked Rome in 387 BC. And Rome also has a vendetta out against all of those Berbers. That's the reason why we were placed in bondage. All right. After the Gallic sack, Rome conquered the whole Italian peninsula in a century and thus became a major power in the Mediterranean wars. In the Mediterranean. Its greatest strategic rival was Carthage, against which it waged 3 wars. Rome defeated Carthage at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, becoming the dominant power of the ancient Mediterranean world. And then you can read the rest of this on your own. That part. What did I want to get to on here? Oh, I wanted to get to the United States. Let's take a look at the United States seal. It says the Great Seal. Now we can see the image to the left, not really focusing on the one on the right, but to the left, as we can see, the image of the eagle, which it said an eagle is a representation of whose symbol? Jupiter. And then we can see the spears in the claws are also representation of the thunderbolts. All right. It says the Great Seal is the seal of the United States. This phrase is used both for the impression device itself, which is kept by the United States Secretary of State, and more frequently for the impression it produces. The verse of the Great Seal depicts the national coat of arms of the United States, while the reverse features a truncated pyramid topped by an eye of Providence. The year of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, 1776, is noted in Roman numerals. At the base of the pyramid, the seal contains 3 Latin phrases, e pluribus unum, out of many one. The Inuit Quoptis, he has favored our undertakings. Who you think they're speaking about? They're talking about Jupiter. So he has favored our undertakings, and Novus Ordo Sociolorum, a new order of the ages. All right. So largely designed by Charles Thomson, Secretary of the Continental Congress, and William Barton, and first used in 1782, the seal is used to authenticate certain documents issued by the federal government of the United States. So once again, the United States, all of this stuff started taking place during the time of Pluto transiting from out of Capricorn into Aquarius. Capricorn represents stability, structure. After Pluto transited out of Capricorn, that ended up bringing the dissolution or dissolving of the old regime, and to start bringing it into a new nation being built off of so-called forward-thinking idols. You know, and in this case, the forward-thinking idols that they were trying to utilize were pretty much coming off of the backs of the English people. And then as time went on, we start seeing that they start utilizing what they call that manifest destiny as of the authority they were using to trace themselves to tie to go to do what they call the Western expansion. And the Western expansion, we know, was built off of slavery. It was built off of removing the so-called indigenous people off of their territories. And it was also part of the conflict in regards the United States trying to expand more territories that Great Britain used to also still own on the western coast. And that land we'll be speaking about would be like Oregon, and I want to say Montana as well. But we'll talk about that in another lesson, because the king is going to expound a little bit further on there, and then I'm going to segue with that information to another lesson, so therefore it can show you the connection in regards to what it is that we're saying, and showing you that what happened back in this time is going to happen again this time, based off of the contracts and the dissolving of regimes that were not supposed to actually be created. And if they were supposed to be created, they were only supposed to be created for a temporary time, for a little bit, because like I said, life constantly continue to keep evolving, and there's nothing new underneath the sun. So their time to operate was only supposed to be for a window. And as you can see now, that time or that window is closing. You know, no longer been able to continue to keep doing this because of you ran out of, you know, your lifespan. It's over. And as you can see also too, to coincide with that, is based off of the new transiting of the ages, because Pisces rules, or excuse me, Jupiter rules the age of Pisces. When Jupiter was ruling the age of Pisces, So when Jupiter was ruling the age of Pisces, we see this is where we're dealing with a lot of these schisms, a lot of different belief systems, different movements, and a lot of these weren't based off of a true foundation, but they was based off of feelings, you know, emotions, and soul connection to something, even though it could have been imaginary. It could be something abstract, because that's what Pisces also deal with. It deals with abstract realities. Well, as you can see with Aquarius, since that's the energy we're moving into, especially the age of Aquarius, Aquarius is naturally ruled anciently by planet Saturn. Planet Saturn is known as the kingmaker. Now, why this is important is because, as you can see, back in 1783, they were dissolving and come away from the monarchy. That was part of that Capricorn, that was part of the Plutonian energy transforming that Capricorn, because Capricorn ruled by Saturn, so that's king, as well as government. And so that was an overthrow, or a reversal, or a new creation had to come from out of the old. And in this case, they all wanted the rights of the Englishman. So they were utilizing all of the rights of the English people, creating their constitutions and everything off of that, even though it wasn't based off of truth. Why? Because the original true people who that was owed to were placed in bondage. So like the switcheroo took place. And remember, Pluto was also known as he deals with both. He deals with life and he deals with death. So what happened was, when we were actually in full life, we put to death. In this case, a death status, a dead status. Pluto deals with the underworld. So when we were in the underworld, which we're still at now, But also Pluto deals with redemption, similar to the planet Saturn. He deals with bringing you up to full life. The other name that Pluto was known as would be Serapis. Serapis, or the Serapis flag, was actually truly the original flag of the United States before the flag that they started going with after they broke away from the so-called flag that they were utilizing when they were still under Great Britain. So the flag that they used first was known as the Serapis flag, and Serapis was known as the god of all gods, not the king of gods, but the god of all gods. And he's known as the god of the underworld, as well as the god of, because he's known as who? Pluto. Pluto is Hades, the underworld. So that's who he's known as. But anywho, so Saturn is also known as, like I said, he's known as the kingmaker. And now the king, as we can see, based off of what happened back in 1783, he lost property. And this king we're talking about, Great Britain, King George III, he lost his property, which was the colonies. Not only that, everyone who was a subject, technically, he lost that as well. So we've been placed in bondage. We were thrown in the underworld, you know, the forgetful world. We couldn't read and write, based because of the Anti-Literacy Act, all of that jazz. And then the United States started operating as a new form of government, which was a Republican form of government underneath the god Jupiter. So as you can see, Jupiter is one ruling them, the Romans, as well, like I said, their form of government, which is the Republican form of government. And he also was running their Roman Catholic Church. So Rome was running the church that also put the people into bondage at this time. Now, 248 years later, now the reverse happens. The government gets dissolved, you know, because they weren't based off of the truth. Hold on 1 second. They weren't based off the truth. The people lost their connection to the king back in that time. So as you can see, the king was toppled, but now the king is back because now the king is being risen from the dead. So when the king rises from the dead, the king get to bring his body politic back from the dead, which only the king of England can do so. And based off of what we are already reading, from the pillars, excuse me, not the pillars, from Jupiter being the god of the Romans, he not only is the god of the Romans, but he's also the god of the United States. He's the god of the Republicans. And we see that he was against, or those who was on the Republican form of government was against a monarchy. So in this case, the monarchy is rising, which means the Republican form of government must be dissolved. And this is a representation of what historically happened when the Gauls or the Berbers or the Picts or anybody who was known as Berbers resisted Roman rule. So Rome have their time of occupying, and then they have their time where they have to leave. You know, they have to flee, they have to dissolve. And in this case, that's what's taking place right as we speak. So that ceremony that was happening may be seen like a rebirth of Notre Dame, but it's actually the rebirth of the English people who have to come back into full life. Why? Because we can read, we can write, we understand what's taking place now, and now we can right the wrongs that these people who are Republican form of government, which is underneath the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church, as well as the Roman Republic, which we see is ruled by their god who they claim to be is Jupiter. And in their great temple, the temple of Jupiter, the Notre Dame Cathedral was built over it. And as we've seen, all of these world leaders came to give their penance in regards to the rebuild or the rebirth after the fire that took place 5 years ago, which all is in the same timeline that happened back in 1790 during the Great Revolution. And once again, as you can see, what's taking place all over the world, there's revolutions happening. So with that being said, the next lesson I'm going to do live is going to go a little bit more in depth in what it is I'm going to be talking about. But from what I'm going to show you from here today, I hope you got an understanding of what it is that what took place and what it is that I'm trying to break down to you in regards of the understanding that you need to know and moving forward, so therefore you're not falling for the banana in the tailpipe gag, that you know that these people aren't truly so-called practicing what you claim to be Christianity, but yet they're still practicing the ancient religion of the Romans before Christianity came in. And for those of you who don't know, that Christianity was actually created by Berbers. And so it was Berbers who had created Christianity, and not in a way that we see as being done today, but in a way that was actually truly healing the people. And unfortunately, like I said, Rome took over that. They made it seem to be something bad and against what it was truly meant for. And it's now our obligation and duty as the heirs to come and bring the right understanding. So therefore, those of you, once you start waking up, you don't run back to these people who actually got you in bondage, because they're utilizing you as a sacrifice. So with that being said, please continue to keep doing the great work. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. This lesson is Notre Dame Cathedral and the Temple of Jupiter connection. Don't forget to go ahead and check out the Third Temple English Church of England, headed by our King Clifford Jefferson from Rouse Plantagenet. As well, for those of you, please, who want to help the cause, because this is an intellectual movement. We don't have much funding. The only people who are funding us is those who want to be part of this, and hopefully you see yourself being part of this, because you are part of Planet Albion. You are those who've been placed in the dead status, and the only way for you to be resurrected again is by you coming back into the true de jour church, which is the true Christ church. I mean, not the churches that these people over here doing, which require them to do human sacrifices. That's not what Christ came back to do. Christ came back to heal the people, and he came to heal the people through proper intelligence, and that's what we're going to come here and do. We're going to give you the intelligence that you need, so therefore that you as well as your posterity can live here in the promised land that your ancestors fought so long and so much for. So with that being said, we love you. Stay tuned to the next lesson, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.